So I'm adding some handy little shelves, some nooks for storing stuff, because there's lots of little areas in a caravan where the space is just not utilised. So one of the things that I was always mindful of is that, you know, you have all these little shelves, but stuff will fall off it, so you have to take it off before you set off in transit. Some of the stuff doesn't need that much to keep it on a shelf. Some of it doesn't really matter if it falls, it's just inconvenient. So I found this aluminium edging. I was actually after something plastic. Now it's got a feature front. I'll just sort of move in closer. Okay, it's not. Yeah, there we go. That's focused in. So that's not a defect. That's actually the feature. And I found this in Bunnings in the tiling section. So what that'll do is I'll put that on the front of my shelves to number one. Oh, I'm going to hold it with one hand, it'd be useful. There we go. So that'll give the shelf strength, but it'll also gives it a good substantial edge to for things not to slide off. So the shelving we're actually using is the Sunlight polycarbonate roofing. So that is quite thick, quite strong, but super light, really stable. So so that's going to be our shelving material. Against the wall, I'm just using plasterer's 12mm right angle cornice, and to secure that to the wall you don't even need to drill holes. There's hardly any left here. These are 15mm button heads, so well, actually they're 13mm, there you go. And you don't even need to drill a hole, so I drill a hole here to put it on the wall, and then just push and screw it in to the caravan walling. And I already converted our wardrobes to, rather than hanging space, to have shelves. So that's that aspect. Now the bolts, I'm just using 4mm by 15mm. I've also got some 3/16 by 12mm gutter bolts, but these are just a little bit smaller, probably about the same head height, with some washers underneath it to give a little bit better stability through the polycarbonate. And I'm going to use nylock nuts because I don't want anything rattling loose, because that does my head in. So there's already some holes here. I've got to just drill those out. So once I've measured this up, I'll drill it, and those bolts that I just mentioned over there will secure this to the polycarbonate shelving. Okay, so that's part one. So that's the materials list. So now I'm going to jump into the caravan. I'll do some photos and some videos of how I sort of measured it, what I thought was important. Hopefully I get it right, and I'll show you what I did. So hopefully you'll get some learnings from my learnings. This is the first place that I'll be adding some shelving to. We've got this void underneath the bathroom cabinet, and it's just a waste of space. It would be a really handy spot. So underneath here, but above, giving plenty of room to, that's an outside collapsible bin. That's just an inside bucket. So probably about, if you can give a perspective, about there. I think it's going to be around 250, 300mm spacing between that and the shelf. And we can put, well, we'll test drive putting toilet paper on it, because that'll be easier access than storing it in under there. And maybe those bath bags, we're carrying those with us at the moment, even though we don't need them in the van, just in case I ever need to use an external shower or whatever. In time they'll probably go, but yeah. Anyway, I'll start on this shelving, marking it out. So you can't use a level when you're marking anything like this out. So I'm just going to measure, don't know, I'll clear all the stuff. I'll either measure up or measure down all the way around, line it out, and then I'll cut my little plastic stripping and screw that to the wall. So the depth of the shelf, I'm actually going to go, that's around 250 deep, I think it is. So I'm actually going to go to about 300. So that's not going to really impinge on this space. Still gives access to the broom. So it'll just give me, you know, as much width or depth on the shelf as I can get. I'm ready to cut the polycarbonate sheeting, so I'm going to go for a depth of 300mm. Just marked it out there. I use this as my cutting guide, and I simply use a Stanley. You've got to press down pretty firmly, do a couple of run-throughs. With the Sunlight polycarbonate sheeting, there is a front edge. Sure if you can see it there. It's a nice rounded edge. So in the when I did the wardrobe hanging to shelf conversion, I used that as the front edge of the shelving because it was important to have a nice clean edge. With this particular setup, because we're using this aluminium trim as the front edge, which will go along that cut edge there, it doesn't matter that I have that, so I'm getting the best use out of the sheet and cutting it this way, so it'll be about 435mm wide and 300mm deep. And I just went to do my cut, and it was really hard work because the blade was not sharp, so make sure you use a really sharp Stanley blade, because this stuff is pretty tough to cut through. So I've cut my shelf to size. I've actually put it in there, and just note that nothing's square in a house or a caravan. So when I put it in there, it fitted really well another way, and when I flipped it, there was a 15mm gap at the back. So just make sure you check that, make a note which way's top. I know this flappy bit's the top. I've trimmed the back corners because it's got the little corner spits in the caravan, so that'll clear that, won't interfere. This is my plastic stripping. Now, even though that's only 12mm, I've got some 25mm stuff, but it's over engineering for what it is. The amount of weight that's going to be on this is going to be more than strong enough. It's not going anywhere. This is not going anywhere. So I've marked it. So the shelf is 435 wide. So I've marked that at 400 because I'm going to have 2 strips going down the side of each one. So this is 12mm. So 2 times 12 is 24. So 435 less 24 is about 400. So that's the bit for along the back. And then I'll cut 2 300mm bits. Now what I use to cut plastics, it doesn't really matter, it's only plastic, is a pair of secateurs. They're a bit grotty, aren't they? Good old Felcos. So I just find that cuts it nice and neatly and doesn't snap it off. You can use snips, whatever, but I did use snips before and it tended to fracture one way on the other side. So that's my tip, so I'll give you another video shortly. Just to give you the heads up on how I actually do cut it so it doesn't fracture, is I'll snip it on one side there, and then turn it, snip it on the other side. Then I can just bend it back, and if I can do this with one hand, which I probably can't, am I holding it in the right place? There we go, boom, and it hasn't fractured it. Hope that helps. Just a quickie on what could potentially become a problem when I put all this together. This is got a depth of, hang on, where are we? This front edge has got a depth of 30mm. So if I cut my side support strut, that the plastic stripping, I might, if I cut it to 300, I might overlap with this. So I'm going to cut that to 250. So this is clear for the front of the shelf. And I've just cleaned up the end of the aluminium so there's no dags. I've had to drill some extra holes. You can see where I've marked them with a texter, and just cleaned up the drill dags on the bottom around the ends, all nice and neat as a pin. And there we go, it's all ready to go. So I've got the front edge cut and sized, ready to go, cleaned up. The side mounts, the back piece, and the other side, you can just see them. So so basically I'll be using those 13mm Whitehead button self-tappers. I'll pre-drill some holes in here, so I'll drill that in there, probably only 2 on the side, 3 along the back, and there's no need to actually screw this to that. that just sits there, it actually jams in place, you know. So make sure you cut your shelving so it's a nice tight snug fit. This will be bolted with the 4mm screws as I indicated before. So the next video will be on me marking out to get it level. And geez, I tell you what, I take my hat off to anybody that permanently works in caravans, because oh my god, you've got to be a bloody contortionist. These are the mount rails. I've used, I think it's about a 2mm, as long as it's big enough for a self-tapper to be pushed through so it can be screwed in. As I mentioned earlier, you don't need to actually drill a hole for the self-tapper. Just hold this rail on the pencil marking and push the self-tapper in and screw away. I'm actually not going to drill and bolt this until the shelf's in situ, in case it needs to be a smidge down or a smidge up. So I just thought to mention that. So it's two sides on, so you can see there's little pencil marks there, so don't draw a big line, just little pencil marks. Just make sure your corners line up. So I'm about to add the third one on there, then I can put the shelf in, then I can put my front edge on, and hey presto. So height of the shelf, that's really important. You can't just whack it in anywhere. It's got to mean something, it's got to be for something. So what I thought was paper towels. We might store paper towels on there, we might not, we might put those in the cupboard, but if I wanted to put them there, or 2 toilet rolls stacked on top of each other, I know that 270 will do it. I think the paper towel was 250 from memory, so I thought 270, that gives me enough room to get it in there, and it's not too much space, because you know, having these big super tall shelves, you can only stack so far in a caravan, so that made sense to me. So it has to mean something. You're going to know what you're going to put on there, or what you're likely to put on there. Another tip I've picked up over the years, when you're screwing something like this, a self-tapper, into this softwood, it's very easy to overdo it. So when you're doing initially, using your whole hand, you're screwing in. As you come up to tension it up, just back off to just use your fingers, because it gives you that little bit more control, and you're not going to strip it out. And there we have the shelf sitting in situ on the plastic rails. It's a nice, well, I'll just move this, it's a nice snug fit, so that's just going to sit there. It's only going to have lightweight stuff on it. You'd have a look at the engineering on this if you're going to put anything super heavy. Mind you, this stuff's pretty strong. Anyway, so there's the front rail. You can't really see it because I'm all crammed in here on this dunny trying to do this. It's a bloody hot day. It's about 37 degrees outside, I think. It's a bit hotter than that in here. I should put the air conditioner on. Anyway, there it is. So I'm about to drill the holes. So I've got the select holes to drill. I'll go get my drill that in situ, put my bolts in, job done. So there we go, all done. New storage shelf, neat as a pin, easy access. Has a front rail, so stuff won't just naturally slide off, so that's brilliant. Whether we store what we've got there at the moment remains to be seen, but hey, I just like using up space and making life easier on the road. And plus, hey, guess what, I'm a hobbyist. So that's Peter Butler, the hobbyist. I hope that video helps.